All right, hello, and thank you for joining us today for our first Let's Chat Cyber session with me, Julia Lee, Senior Manager of the Education and Center of Excellence Unit within the Cybersecurity Division of the Ontario Public Sector. I'm very excited today to host as we discuss today's topic on the human factor of cybersecurity. With me today, joined by our special guest, John Roberts, Chief Information Security Officer, and David Langille, Head Cybersecurity Strategy. Technology, of course, is always going to be at the heart of cybersecurity, but we need to recognize a little bit more strongly that it is so on the human side, and so is the business side, and these need to be brought together. And we also need to make sure that we're drawing on all of this knowledge that is available from human-centric disciplines to really influence what we do to be most effective when we're working with the human element of cybersecurity. And it's difficult because I guess cybersecurity is very broad, as you know, it's very deep and it's pretty young. This industry hasn't been around for that long, and particularly when it comes to the human side, we're still learning an awful lot. And we're dealing with an ever-evolving set of complicated problems, despite the world that we currently live in. But the human side of cybersecurity, of course, you know, it's been around for a long time in terms of information security, but really embedding it in an organization, really looking in terms of how it actually plays out and what it means in combination with the technical side, that's still quite new to many organizations. And the fact that we have this industry that is broad and deep and young means that it can put a lot of pressure on those working in this industry. And I think some of you guys who have joined in today can probably nod or agree with that. For decades, we wanted people to listen to us. We wanted friends, our family, our colleagues to ask us questions, to seek our advice. We wanted more budget, and now increasingly organizations are finding that they're getting at it and they have the board's attention and they're being asked more questions. But that can also play as a double-edged sword, and it can feel great on one level, but on the other level, it can really increase the pressure on individuals and on teams alike. But today, looking at the human factor of cybersecurity, one of the reasons why cybersecurity is so important is because in over 85% of cases, the root cause of a cyber incident can be traced back to actions of people. That includes our staff, have taken either intentionally or inadvertently. And I wanted to kick this off to our guests today in terms of how does Ontario's cybersecurity strategy mitigate the risks associated with human error?
Thanks, Julia. It's a great question, and human dimensions, as you've highlighted, are absolutely important things for us to consider. Before I start answering, I'd just like to acknowledge that I'm speaking today from the traditional territory of the Anishinaabe, the Huron-Wendat, the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, and the Mississaugas of the Credit here in Toronto in Treaty 13 territory. And I'd like to recognise the long-standing and ongoing association of those nations with this land. To your questions about cybersecurity strategy and people, as you say, we do know that a vast majority of the incidents and breaches that we face are a result of people factors rather than the technical side of things. You mentioned Ontario government's cybersecurity strategy. That's really important for a couple of reasons. Firstly, it does actually highlight the significance of the people factors. One of the 5 pillars that we have in our multi-year strategy is around end user awareness, education, information. So recognizing that cybersecurity is a technical discipline, but actually it's everybody's business at the end of the day. I mean, some of the folk on this call may have heard me before saying cybersecurity is a team game. Everybody needs to be part of it, and we rely on everyone to do their part. So education awareness explicitly called out through things like successful Cybersecurity Awareness Month programs, but more tactically a real focus on phishing. You know, it is phishing attacks, it is the increasingly sophisticated emails and often spear phishing campaigns that are so often at the heart of things. And strategically, by recognizing that and making it a distinct focus in our work as something that is a core theme that we keep coming back to, keep emphasizing and build that muscle memory, that awareness, that embedding the hygiene factors in the way people work is really critical. Of course, at a macro level, it's important that we manage down the impacts of human error by giving it as little room to move as possible. The technical controls that intercept a lot of phishing and malicious emails before they even get to the end user, and the well-rehearsed routines for responding and dealing with any incidents that do get through are part of the complete ecosystem of checks and balances. But that weakness, that opportunity for people to be tricked, fooled, make mistakes, is always going to remain. And part of our approach is to make sure that it's not overly punitive. The last thing you want is to create a climate of fear where people who do, for whatever reason, distracted, stressed, just subject to a really, really smart attack, don't feel that it's safe to report that incident when they, if it does happen. So a part of this is normalizing the cybersecurity conversation and encouraging people to know that they can and should report incidents, whether that's reporting suspicious emails, or even more important, reporting if they have done something that in hindsight was just plain dumb and they have exposed the enterprise. So a real embrace of both the cultural and educational awareness pieces is absolutely at the heart of our strategy. Dave, I don't know if you want to add anything about some of the components of that work.
Yeah, I think that the phishing program is key, but I think it's one piece of the education and awareness program that we have in the government of Ontario. So that's monthly webinars and sessions to get people involved, asking questions, getting them aware. We operate a fairly exciting cybersecurity awareness month program each year. So getting that idea of cybersecurity constantly in the mind, so building it as part of the culture so that people are aware of the security risks, why they might be targeted. So thinking about, why me, they may not understand that. Also giving them information about how to protect themselves personally seems to help in terms of protecting themselves at work. So there's advice that we're giving and providing to our users. It's something that they can use at home and in the workplace. So that seems to be helpful in terms of embedding that knowledge and learning into their brains. On the other side of it, away from the end users, we also operate a cybersecurity program that supports IT developers and administrators, and we're looking at providing advice and guidance to them as they're developing solutions. And putting programs out there. So making sure that we're providing advice and guidance around risk, and if they're developing software and they're developing programs and there's errors there, hopefully we can catch them through the risk assessment or the penetration testing services that we provide, and also through our comprehensive cybersecurity operations center to try and to catch things that are slipped past and users are accidentally clicking on something. We do have tools and services in place to help protect from that point.
Excellent. I must admit, when I heard the question, I immediately went to human error in terms of end user. But I think you're also right that there's a big part of just making sure that all of the people involved in the deployment management of systems can play their part effectively. So human error could be just sloppy coding or an oversight from a developer, rather than necessarily someone clicking on a malicious link.
Misconfiguration.
Yeah, exactly. So human errors can be at all levels. The recognizing the people factors. I think part of the challenge we have as a profession is that cybersecurity stuff is, as you said in your opening comments, Julia, quite technical, and finding the ways to explain to people the technically complex risks and vulnerabilities in ways that will resonate, whoever they are, whether they're an end user, whether they're a developer, whether they're more on sort of the risk management side. One of the big challenges for us as a profession, I think it's great to see this human focus in today's conversation, is around the storytelling, finding the language, the way to explain cyber issues in ways that make sense to people. If you're a public servant or an employee of any organisation who's been working from home, you just want to do your job. You probably don't have the technical skills to start thinking about home network configurations and the like, and yet we all know that there can be risks introduced through some poor deployment. So how do we tell that story in a way that engages people in an actionable way? We don't want to just scare them. We want to actually scare people in a way that changes their behavior rather than just causing additional stress and anxiety. So storytelling as a new skill set for the cyber professional, I think, is an interesting issue.
That's correct, John. And I think it's very interesting, just within the cybersecurity division, we're comprised of the 7 units, and we have, the technical side, the business side, but more particularly, David leads the strategy and risk management architecture branch, where you've got the business moving the needle for our cybersecurity strategy, as well as the technical skills too. So just out of curiosity, in terms of your daily roles, is there kind of a divide in terms of priorities that you're looking at for the organization?
Dave, let's start.
That's a good question. Well, as John was talking about the pillars that we have, one of the main pillars is our support to the broader public sector, and so looking to see how we can better support them. So there's a lot of work happening in that space right now, and it's new for us, where we have a mandate to support the government proper. We now have a goal of education and awareness and supporting the broader public sector, and working towards that. So that is a big priority for us this year, and as we're moving forward. I would say another priority area for me is the education and awareness side, as we've just talked about, and the risk advisory services piece, in making sure that the businesses and the ministries that are developing and providing services have a full understanding of the cyber risks that they have, so that they can understand it and make risk-based decisions on how they want to proceed. You can't stop all risks, so you have to make a decision based on your risk tolerance and the services that you need to provide to citizens. So those are some of the 3 key areas that I'm thinking about these days.
And I'll let people into a little bit of a secret. I mean, my background is actually not in cybersecurity, so I know just enough to make a fool of myself if I start talking about too much of the technical stuff. So for me, the priorities really are very much in that engagement, relationship, storytelling side of the business. I have a fantastic team of expert, technically competent people who do all that magical stuff. But my priorities are far more in the business of creating the awareness, creating the support, engaging with our colleagues in risk management, in audit, at the IT top table, engaging with myself in my alternative role as Chief Privacy Officer. So creating those connections, the strategic coherence, building the burning platform where people continue to remain focused on cybersecurity, and don't assume that just because 2 or 3 years back a strategy was approved, that now everything is tidy. So in terms of day-to-day priorities, my time, my energy is far more committed to that kind of awareness, advocacy, and building the right preconditions for success from all of the different teams. So last week, things like presenting to all of our internal audit committee chairs to try and give them the insights that they need about the cyber program, in order to then understand any particular risks and issues that come up in audit reports. And when having those kind of conversations, not being too deep in the technical side is actually an advantage, because it prevents me from getting into a level of specific complexity that would actually lose that audience. So I actually think of it as an advantage that I can make sure when I'm talking to Dave or our cyber ops leads or whatever, that I've got the broad brush, but then I don't have the temptation, so to go to a level of detail that the audience would find confusing.
That's excellent. Thanks for sharing your insights and just kind of a glimpse in terms of the challenges that you face in your roles. But just going back in terms of every year, we hear the increasing threats that I think, John, you touched on at the beginning, and challenges in terms of complexities and increasing cyber threats. But this past year, it's been record-breaking in terms of data lost and breaches, and just the sheer volume of cyber attacks on companies, government, and individuals. And cyber threats are increasing in their complexity and sophistication, as we know, and damages from these attacks can range to the millions of dollars. But keeping this in mind, how can organizations really best create a cybersecurity geared mindset, you think?
Well, I think the cyber mindset is really important. I think I mentioned it earlier, just having a strategy is a really good piece to focus attention. But a cyber secure mindset does mean getting everybody engaged. It is about tone from the top, and as well as all of the grassroots education for individuals, that will have a lot more resonance with our staff when they are also hearing their senior executives talk about cyber as a key consideration. So part of building that cyber aware culture in depth is, I think, about linking cybersecurity back to the overall enterprise aspirations and vision. One of the things that I'm very strong on in my engagements and connections is to remind folk that cybersecurity is not just a technical hygiene factor that happens somewhere within the IT organization. Cybersecurity is a key enabler of our strategic aspirations around digital delivery, about online engagement, about trust, confidence. Pretty much any organization is looking to leverage and harness the opportunities from digital business, whether it's a traditional bricks and mortar organization increasingly looking to promote or complement through online channels, whether it's government looking to engage effectively people wherever they are in the province and do so in a way without creating public health risks in the recent period. We're all trying to do better online. And that means engaging with cybersecurity. So it's not just a matter of compliance. It's not just a matter of industry standards. It's actually a fundamental enabler of being able to do what we want to do as organizations. And being able to remind all of our partners in the organization, create that investment from decision makers, senior executives, and the like. So where cybersecurity is not just lost, you mentioned earlier, Julia, that we've been trying for years to get that seat at the table, as it were. But that's not just because of some sort of sense of a desire to be sitting with the big kids. It's actually because that's an important part of influencing decisions. And the culture is partly about the way that people act as end users and reinforcing the importance of good practice, but it's also about embedding cybersecurity considerations into all strategic and investment choices. And one of the things that we know is as we start to engage more broadly with the wider public sector, with entities where we don't operationalize their IT, but have a huge interest in the adequacy of systems, that having the understanding and the recognition from the executives, from the governance boards and the like, that cybersecurity is not something they can just leave to the cybersecurity teams, something that they should expect to see in regular risk reporting. It's something that should be a factor in terms of partnerships, of strategic procurement decisions. All of these pieces can have an effect. So the first thing is being able to get that engagement from people at all levels. Culture is not something that you create by writing it down in a document and posting it. Culture is the organic result of the way people talk, the way people behave, the decisions that they see, and ensuring that all people within the enterprise get those regular cues. So cybersecurity matters. It matters not just in an abstract sense. It matters actually in an ability to to treat our customers and our clients with the respect that they deserve so that they can trust us. It matters so that we can have sustainable, reliable, effective services, that we've got the foundations to deliver against whatever flavour of digital strategy is involved. That's important. So embedding cyber thinking in all aspects of organisational decision making, that's the culture piece, and that's about the full court press, from the phishing campaigns that we were just talking about, the work with our corporate partners to ensure that cyber is connected. So for us, that's ensuring it's embedded in broader risk reporting, ensuring that it's embedded in procurement and design models, ensuring that it's a factor in organisational training expectations and the like. So getting that comprehensive piece. So I'll shut up now, because as you can, this is a bit that gets me excited. This is kind of part of my priority in the place, is really trying to create that culture, because that's as CISO, that's where I see a lot of my focus needs to be, creating an organisation that takes cybersecurity seriously wherever they are. Dave, you've got probably a slightly different perspective on this.
Well, I think the perspective I've seen, and it's changed over the last 10, 15 years, is where cyber was seen as a cop, where a gate where you'd have to be stopped by us. And what I've seen is that it's changed, where cybersecurity is there really to help support the business and to support the ministries. And so it's a different relationship than it was 10 years ago, where we're just compliance and you got to follow all the rules and we're making sure that you're doing exactly what you need to do. And that's different now. And so we're, as you were just saying, John, about giving them information, we're looking to see how we can give them the information that they need around the risks that they're facing, and our advice around how they can mitigate those risks, right? And making it very clear to say, here's the situation that you're in, and you're going to have to make the decisions about what's best for you. And so we're not there to police and to stop, and we're there to support them and to help them. And I think that by building that in through the relationship, I think that's helping to change the overall mindset. It's something that they do want to have conversations about security. They do care about it. And so I think I've seen that change over the last little while. In terms of the end user and kind of that security mindset, as you were talking about, guidance from leaders from above. The other thing that we've seen successful is the gamification or the competition, and creating kind of at that level where you're looking to see, can I beat this other ministry, or can I compete against other folks? And we've seen gamification in the private world in terms of gaming for fitness and other activities. So we can see that helping to improve the security posture in our organization through some of those other ways of doing it. So I'm just thinking about it again in kind of a two-way to say, there's different ways of looking at it.
I like your characterization of a mature cyber-aware culture as being one where it's not a matter that people allow cyber to make all the decisions. It's actually a matter where cyber considerations are embedded as a dimension, as a perspective on the decisions that everyone is taking as part of the organisation. So rather than creating a silo that is put on a pedestal or is respected, actually creating the more organic embedding of cyber thinking throughout the organisation. I think that's spot on as the kind of expression of what a mature cybersecurity aware culture looks like.
That's right. I think that's excellent points there, John and Dave, in terms of looking in terms of our culture, to our behavior, to making sure that it's not the traditional method of seeing as cybersecurity division is kind of the do not type of division, do not do this, do not do that. But one of the quotes that really resonated with me, and it's come time and time again in terms of just our conversations today around everything linking back to for the people. If security doesn't work for people, it doesn't work. And that's a quote from the National Cybersecurity Center, which essentially sums up, cybersecurity program is only as effective as it is for the people that we're working for. And if people don't follow it, it's obviously another thing, a component of what we usually say, cybersecurity is everyone's responsibility as we all work together to make sure that we're all secure and we're all in it together. But moving on to a hot topic, ransomware. It's been a hot topic in the news lately, where large-scale attacks against companies such as Kazay a few weeks ago and Colonial Pipelines last month have been making headlines. These ransomware attacks caused mass disruption, as we know, and can have far-reaching implications. But given the rise in cyber attacks, how is the government of Ontario strategizing against potential threats?
Oh, well, there's ransomware, I think, is a really interesting one. And as you mentioned, Julie, I think one thing that I would note about ransomware is the way that it's changed, even just probably within the last couple of years, from a focus on business disruption to far more efforts at data exfiltration. So the risk consideration when it was simply a matter of how long to get my systems back up and running again is quite different than if your sensitive customer or staff information has been exfiltrated and is at risk. So ransomware now has a different flavour of what the demand is, what the threat is, and I think we need to really be mindful when thinking about that. When you start putting more of that data lens on it, it brings more attention to things like the analysis of data sensitivity. So a traditional ransomware protection model would have been far more about perimeter protection. If the shift to what's the risk to our data, then you need to understand your data assets rather than just understanding your network structures, because it's a different focus for cyber professionals in terms of where their risk and protective skills are deployed. So I think for us, complementing obviously the continued expansion of tools and the protection and network monitoring side, more emphasis on ensuring that we do understand which data resources are sensitive, data minimization practices, the data encryption at rest and in transit and the like. Really minimizing the privileged access accounts and making sure that we've got robust practices there. A whole lot of pieces, but with a slightly different flavor as a result of what has evolved in the ransomware environment. Again, within the broad themes of this morning's conversation, there's also a lot there about recognizing that if you have some kind of major incident, it's not purely for the cyber team to be making the response decisions. So some of this awareness, this culture that we've been talking about and emphasizing over the last little while is ensuring that if there is an incident, or when there is an incident, I probably recognize it's a when not if scenario, that the folk who need to be involved understand. So again, part of our response is also the practice to make sure that decision makers understand what role they will have to play if there is an incident. So tabletopping of scenarios, really communicating well the incident response practices, making sure that all of the relationships with the different stakeholders, the communications, the legal, for us in government, the folk on the political side, that those communication channels are practiced and that folk understand what role they may have to play. So again, I think it's a bit of a full court press here. There's the very technical pieces. There's some new areas of attention in terms of where we have to provide protections, but also those human factors, particularly to get all of the different folk prepped up in advance of any incident happening.
I think you covered it pretty well there, John. I think it is a full court press. I think the kind of the three main areas that I think about when we're providing advice and guidance is of course the user training. So making sure that a lot of the ransomware is coming in through phishing attacks. So as we've talked about before, making sure the users are aware of that. But actually, then when you're dealing with the ransomware, if you are attacked, making sure that you have segregated backups seems to be, one of the big solutions. So number one, what data they have. That sometimes if you don't have proper backups, you're not sure what data they have access to. and also the big push, and we have this in place for our organization, is multi-factor access. So making sure that you have a second factor access into your systems if you're remoting in. So to be technical, those are some of the three areas that I think about in terms of ransomware attacks.
Yeah. And I know that I have seen too many incidents where MFA is really deployed at scale only as a lesson learnt from an incident recovery rather than being in place. So hopefully I don't have to highlight that to anyone on this call, but these practices are helpful. So getting your basics right, I think more attention on things like your data loss prevention type tools. There's a few things that are increasing in priority. Perhaps one thing just to add in terms of the whole ransomware environment. Obviously, there's quite a few stories continuing in the media. We have seen a few of those in the context of the broader public sector in Ontario. We have a lot of interest in supporting not just the core ministries of the provincial government, but also the whole kind of operations of the Ontario province. So part of our focus has been figuring out how do we deliver some of these protections, some of these this culture, all of this cyber resilience, where we don't have the same level of visibility about the technical solutions that are in play, or the level of control over various IT decisions. So there's a particular flavour that has in government, but I think for pretty much any enterprise, you will have partners, you'll have vendor partners, understanding supply chain risk, understanding partner risk. All of these pieces come into play because we are operating in far more complex networked environments where we not just making decisions about our own infrastructure, but making assumptions and assuming risk from all of our partners. So again, a part of evolving our maturity is just understanding all of those connection points, understanding all of those partnerships, and what does that mean for our risk posture? Because when we say things come in to our organizations through people, it's not always just our own people. It can be staff or clients in partner organizations that end up being the weak links. So you have to take a very kind of multi-level approach to understanding the environment. It is the inevitable flip side of a highly networked world, is that there are more vectors available for attack.
That's right. Thanks, John. And at this point, for those who joined in the call today, if you have any thoughts in terms of insights in terms of how you guys are strategizing against potential threats, particularly around ransomware, I'd love to hear it. So please add that to our chat. I'd love to see it, and we'll have a Q&A session right after this to answer any of your questions that you may have. But at this point, John, you lead quite a robust mandate in terms of making sure that we've got a cybersecurity program to protect all ministries in Ontario Public Service. I think we're at about 27 ministries, if I recall correctly. It's ever changing as we kind of merge and separate some of the ministries. But then we also have a very interesting mandate to protect the broader public sector. So is there anything that you would wanted to kind of share with today's audience, especially folks coming from the broader public sector, not always particularly from Ontario, but maybe some lessons learned that they can leverage from our chat today?
Sure. I think one of the key things for us, again, going back to the importance of an explicit strategy to set out some of the parameters and intent. One of the other pillars in our Ontario cybersecurity strategy was to recognise the connections and the investment that we have in the broader public sector. So all of the agencies, the boards, the hospitals, the universities, the school boards, all of that kind of infrastructure in the province that isn't directly run by the provincial government, but is funded and is certainly part of the overall delivery of public services in that broader sense. So we have a key pillar that is about creating a stronger support and ultimately a more secure, broader public sector environment. And to provide a real sort of focus to that work, we did create a centre of excellence for the broader public sector cybersecurity world. So that has involved doubling down on some of those tools like education, awareness, orchestration of incident response, providing a panel of expert services to help organisations. But the other thing I think's been really interesting for me over the past year is the reminders that we don't walk in that world. We walk in a slightly different part of the organisational space. So our then minister has pulled together an expert panel of practitioners and thought leaders from the different kinds of organisations to give some more informed advice about where the province can support that ecosystem. So we've seen a lot of great response already to things like online training tools, more consistent guidance around how incidents can be managed, just the existence of easy to find points of contact for guidance and advice, communities of practice so that folk can share their experiences with others who are in similar kinds of entities. But there are undoubtedly going to be opportunities for shared tools, shared services. Small entities can't necessarily afford or realistically expect to have in-house cyber expertise, and yet just some basic 24/7 cyber ops oversight is a really good foundational capability. So understanding what should be done collectively and what needs to be done individually, getting that more fine-grained understanding of the ecosystem, I think is really interesting. Already, we've had advice from that expert panel that's reminded us of the importance of tone from the top. And again, I think it's been a bit of a theme on this call, the importance of having the senior governance leaders aware of what cyber means and why it is a top table issue. So that again has come through for us loud and clear, that even if we were to provide easier access to shared services, we'd still need to create an environment where the smaller entities understand why they should be procuring and using those services. So there's a little bit of demand side, there's a bit of supply side, but it's interesting. And as I mentioned earlier, I think the dynamics of that have a particular flavour for government, and I'm sure there are various government folk on this call from different jurisdictions, including hopefully Ontario, but there are similar dynamics at play for any organisation in terms of its partners, its suppliers and the like. Dave, the Cybersecurity Centre of Excellence falls into your branch. So did you want to add any colour commentary about how we're embracing that BPS uplift?
Yeah, sure. I think you spoke to it a little earlier, is around that this is a real team effort. And I think with cybersecurity and the conversations that we're having, we're really seeing, although they're separate organizations and we don't have control over the broader public sector, it's a common goal, it's a common concern that all the practitioners that we've been talking with, we all share that together. And so I think that one of the biggest advantages of the Center of Excellence and also the expert panel is getting folks together to share and to figure out what's going to work best for all of the public service in Ontario. And I think it's key. There's a lot of small organizations, there's some bigger ones, there's a lot of sharing of the position that they're in and the difficulties that they're having. But I think by having a community of practice and a center of excellence that's working together, you're really taking advantage of all the team players and coming together to solve or to work to help to improve the posture of the public sector. All of the organizations are all in there to provide services to the people of Ontario. So we're all going in the same direction. And I've seen such a great response in terms of a team effort and wanting to work together, wanting to communicate. The people on the expert panel are volunteering their time to help to work towards solve this problem. So it's been really from in my past, kind of working in the OPS proper in the government and kind of doing an independent thing, and then working now with the broader public sector, it's great to see how we can all come together to help to improve security for the people of Ontario. So, I mean, it's kind of a high level. I found this on the web. A high level comment, but it's been exciting to see that piece of it.
That's great. I'm just going to add to that point in terms of the work from our cybersecurity expert panel. To knowing more about the cybersecurity division, I'm just going to ask you guys who are on the line today to join cybersecurity.ontario.ca. You can find more information about those topics at hand. But perhaps to summarize what we've spoken about today, when we think of the human factor, it's really important to recognize that it isn't just about awareness. It's about every element of cybersecurity, and criminals very much exploit our digital trust, and they definitely have, while it's been a flux in the past year that we've seen. And we cybersecurity professionals and as organizations, we really must think about how we nurture that digital trust. But to do that, focusing on cybersecurity culture and really having a robust cybersecurity strategy to move us forward is key. And I'm going to thank John and Dave as our special guests on our first show today to take your time to share us all of your insights. And thank for those who have watched and participated in today's chat. I'm going to be opening it up to our Q&A at this point. All right, I see a lot of questions trickling through now. So we'll start off with our first question. I'd really like to learn how social media teams at the ministry are being trained on cybersecurity, especially with remote work. How are you guiding them around screenshots, webinars, and digital outreach? So I'll open it up to John and Dave, who would like to go first on this one.
I'll perhaps just add a few comments, Julia. Great comment. We do a lot of work with our comms team in a couple of ways. Firstly, we try to make sure that they're also paying attention to all of the advice that we have, so that their legitimate communications are not misinterpreted as phishing attacks or the like. We want to make sure that what they are doing is actually going to get the message through. The other piece is, of course, recognizing that while we have some internal comms channels, external social media type stuff is a really important part of the reach out to that broader community that we've been talking about, to the whole of the sort of distributed cyber team. So while we can do a lot to promote stuff, the reach that we get from partnering with our social media folk is actually huge. So there's a lot of engagement to help them amplify the message and make sure that some folk who don't go and read the corporate advice sites and check the policies are picking up messages about cybersecurity because they're following their minister, they're following their ministry's social media feed. So try to use all of those channels to get the messaging out to staff and get it in a way that is clearly authoritative, is not misleading, and where the links are safe and all the sort of cyber hygiene is embedded in those messages. Dave, did you want to add anything on that?
No, I don't think so. I think you covered it all.
All right, thanks very much, John. So moving in order to our second question, do you conduct any security safety drills?
Sure, I can take that one. Yeah, so we call those tabletop exercises, and that's where we do it internally, and we also do it to support our other partners. So looking at sitting down and thinking about what your plan is, and then walking through a scenario. So much like a fire drill, where you have a plan of how you're going to deal with a fire in a building, you're going to test that plan. You're going to go through that. So with a tabletop exercise around a cybersecurity incident, for example, you'd have all the decision makers at the table and thinking about how you would deal with the scenario, taking steps through about an ever-increasing scenario that's happening, and trying to make decisions around communication plan. And do you have somebody that you know you can contact to come in and support you? Do you have legal issues? Do you have a communication plan in place? So looking at all the steps of dealing with an incident and making sure that before the incident actually is happening, that you've thought through a lot of the different issues and a lot of the different decisions that you're going to have to make. And so we run those internally. We help support other ministries in doing those tabletop exercises, and also working with our broader public sector partners to just try and do that as well. So yeah, definitely that is a key aspect of a good cybersecurity program, is to make sure that you're testing your responsiveness.
Thanks, Dave. That's because when we're talking about these human factors, it's one thing to write someone down in a plan and give them a responsibility, but if they don't know and don't understand what they're expected to do, it's not really going to be effective. And I must admit, even for myself, each time we go through one of those tabletop exercises, there are things that come out that make you stop and think and realize that some of the key contacts maybe you haven't got in your phone, or what do you do when you try to reach a decision maker and they are somewhere deep in Algonquin Park and off the grid? So do you know what delegations they have in place? Do you know who can act? So having that stress testing is really critical. The other thing I'd add to Dave's comments is this year we've also done a bit of work with our broader business continuity emergency management colleagues to suggest that when they are doing reviews and tests of various business continuity plans, that one of the scenarios that they use might be a cybersecurity incident, and starting to not just see the tabletopping as something that is when cybersecurity is naturally part of the conversation or in the room, but if there's a conversation happening with some part of the organization in terms of their continuity of operations, do they know what to do? Have they thought about it through a business continuity lens? So our people, the cyber experts, are probably the ones who are most familiar with what to do. But really, this conversation is all about making sure that everybody in the organization knows their part to play. So trying to get those tests not just into exercises that are run explicitly by us, where everyone's kind of thinking cyber to start with, but more broadly, when people just think about how do they continue, what could disrupt their operations, that's been part of maturing our sort of program testing.
Yeah, great points. And I think just add to that, these tabletop exercises really build awareness around that we've been talking about in today's session, but also enable folks who are actually around the table who are participating to be more fully value their roles and responsibilities and identify any concerns and risks on that front.
It's also, I think, can be a bit of an eye-opener for folk who do have a role to play, to suddenly realize that the way a cyber issue can manifest can be complicated and technical, and they don't necessarily understand what's being presented. If they're told that there's such and such a system compromised and these kinds of cyber issues present, what does that mean? That's both insightful for our business partners. It's also a way that we can practice, how do we tell that story in a way that people will understand what's going on? So.
Yeah, I think one of the issues that we've seen coming out of some of those is around the communications plan, and that's a big piece of it. And some of the recommendations are, if you have an idea around some of the issues that could happen, putting together some draft communications that you would be able to send and share that out, kind of putting together whatever it is you can prepare ahead of time, so that you're not trying to come up with solutions and trying to think while you're being attacked and the stress is on. So there are some templates that you can put together and try and have that ready to go in case, if you're going to be, if you lose access to your computer network, you can build in some communication and some planning there ahead of time.
Yep. I think some of the most fun tabletops that I've been part of are where the scenario that you're working through does affect a whole lot of the communication channels. So suddenly you're all in a Teams meeting, and the scenario says, and by the way, you've realized that all your Teams channels are no longer secure. So let's just stop this right now. Somebody kills the session. Okay, so everybody's thrown out and has to regroup. But just actually, you don't want to be confronting that when you're also stressed about a real incident. Just having some of that preparation in advance is a safe space for figuring out just how do you need to regroup. What are the alternative channels, for example?
Right. All right, so moving into our next question, which really speaks to the need for an education and an awareness kind of function at every organization right now. How do you approach making cybercrime more consumable for people who are less tech-centric employees?
Oh, that's such a good question, and it's I know it's something that keeps Julia and her team awake at night. Is the challenge of actually reaching the people who are, on the one hand, probably rightly a bit nervous of stuff because they know that they're not tech savvy, but also often uncomfortable with some of the tips and tricks that we give them, and getting things into plain language in ways that folk who are not tech savvy can understand is a very real challenge. I'm not going to deny it. Some of the things that we have found, just being conscious of that right up front helps, and making sure that before communications are sent out, you've actually tested them with some folk who are perhaps not from your own team. So have you got some real sort of lay people who are technically less knowledgeable, who can review things and say, this sounds really important, but I haven't got a clue what you're asking me to do. Making sure that you do use a good standard comms tactics, make stuff exciting, interesting, good visuals, all that sort of stuff, get people engaged. Having gamification, and we've done things that had like avatars of people, putting the human face on things. In our Cybersecurity Awareness Month campaign last year, one thing that went down really well with a lot of staff was just having Ask Me Anything sessions with our cybersecurity folks. So humanizing our work, again, can make it less scary, because then sometimes people don't know, but they don't feel as worried about asking if they've seen that there are real normal people working in the cyber function trying to help them. And of course, just thinking about how do you humanize the attackers as well, and kind of turn it from an abstract threat into a real threat? How do you talk about what could go wrong in language that people understand, why people would target them, what the bad guys are trying to do? So it's a continuing challenge, because the reality is that cybersecurity stuff is really technical often. The threat vectors, the ways in which systems are compromised can be immensely complex, and we can't afford to put all that in the foreground. We will lose users, but just making sure that we are continually putting ourselves in the shoes, humanizing all the aspects, and trying to think about all the stuff that other technology companies use to communicate. Things like the gamification and badges and challenges and all that sort of stuff. In our Cyber Security Awareness Month last year, the other thing we did was a challenge, getting teams to work collectively and challenge each other to do all sorts of tasks and discussions, and attending webinars and the like. And again, just some of that peer pressure from colleagues, but also peer support helps folk get engaged and excited about cyber rather than just scared.
Yeah, I think it would just that all is rings true. I think I would just add a couple other points. And one of the one of the ways we try to approach it on our side is providing some tips and advice that will help them in their personal life. So if they're able to understand how it will benefit them on their home life and their personal, they'll be able to absorb that maybe a little bit more than if they're just thinking about it in terms of this is going to benefit work. But if they see the value in themselves, and they can carry that over into their work life. So we think about it in terms of, how's it going to benefit them, and that it helps to make it more real when we're also protecting the data and the systems at work. And I think the other thing I just wanted to add is also we try to use real life examples. So, people do get phishing emails all the time. People are aware of COVID. So when we're doing our phishing testing and education, we're trying to show them some of the examples that they're going to see in their real life coming into their personal accounts. Are they going to get something special with COVID? Is there free gift cards? Things like that. So trying to make sure that the training that we're providing is actually, relevant and realistic. And that helps to make it real, because then they're seeing training that is just like real life, and as they can see that, they see how that matches into the training that we're providing. So I think just to add those 2 points, but yeah, I think really just trying to make it real for them.
Thanks, Dave. I love your point there about actually making it valuable for them. I think that's something that is, I think, important at all levels of this sort of cyber awareness, cyber education. That it can't just be treated as a compliance or a thing that people ought to do or a thing that they're told to do by a policy. We need to both make it real and make it valuable for them. So why do they want to? What's in it for them? More than just there's a policy that says they have to do X, Y, Z, and that's all that stuff you say about real examples, making the whole thing real and concrete and meaningful, so that people are invested in doing things to the best of their ability.
Great, and something that we do on the education side is we have a kind of a did you know segment, just really connecting it back to in terms of the impacts of the user action. So I see that there's a lot of comments trickling through, and many of you are still on the line with us at this point. So please keep those questions and comments rolling through. I just wanted to read some of these comments out to share with you. As someone who is in this space and isn't extremely technical, I felt that after I started viewing cybersecurity as a game, subject matter became easier to consume. So really speaking to, I think, the tabletop exercises that we discussed today. And another individual said, tabletops, yep, all for it. So we can definitely see that there's a lot of people who definitely enjoy the gamification of cybersecurity. And that's definitely a way for us to just kind of consume that information and drawing it back to how do we really simplify and scale down cybersecurity as a subject matter for folks who don't have the background. All right, so moving on to our next question. How do you test your cyber hygiene?
Dave, do you want to?
Sure. Yeah. Well, one of the main ways that we test our cyber hygiene in the Ontario government is through phishing campaigns that we operate monthly, and it goes out to all of our employees. So giving them an opportunity to see sample scenarios of phishing campaigns, and giving them an opportunity to report them. If they report them, they're going to see a successful, you've caught this one. So it is at gamification, but it's also letting us know if the education and training programs that we're providing to users is working, and we're able to see the susceptibility of those users to those emails, and make sure that we can tailor our training and tailor our campaigns to be targeted to them. Also, we also have systems in place within our email system, which does check and test for phishing emails. So we're able to see how well that system is working by the number of actual emails that are getting through versus the number that are being blocked. Anything else you wanted to add about that, John?
So, I mean, I'm assuming that in this context, the question is more about those end users, because obviously we have a whole bunch of routines in terms of the technical infrastructure and regular vulnerability management scans and checking up on our patching status and a whole set of practices to follow through on identified risks during solutioning and the like, that again are in a sense part of ensuring that we have good practice and depth from the deeply technical infrastructure side right through to the end users. But yeah, I think, Dave, you've hit the pieces that really help us understand the behaviour of the actual staff out there in the office. One of the key things is trying to create that culture where people are not afraid to come forward, because it's cyber hygiene is not about everybody being super scared and trying to do the right thing. It's also about the environment where when something does happen, people click on something that's wrong, that the risks are managed by getting rapid information that's happened, being able to contain and deal with it quickly. So part of the practices and education is about creating that environment that's safe for people to communicate if something has run off the rails.
Great. All right, we've got our next question here. Quite a challenging one. What are the 3 basic principles during an incident response with priority? So this is a good test for the cyber team. John, did you want to take that one on first?
I should be able to recall these basic steps, but I always get them in the wrong order. But the understanding of what's happening, containment, obviously, as a very early step, communication, and then ultimately the notifications and response, and of course the longer term, the lessons learned. But when there is something happening, you're understanding what it is and containing the spread of that incident as rapidly as possible is obviously a priority. The one little caveat there is that sometimes containment actions can tip off the threat actors to what's going on, and there is a little bit of judgment required about when to do things, just in case that can actually trigger additional consequences before one fully understands the situation. Dave, you want to add a bit more colour on some of those steps?
I think that's those are 3. It's hard to figure out priority because you do need to have multiple people involved in doing things. So there's some parallel activities there. So when I think when you were talking, John, containment, the tech team needs to be on site there, are involved heavily, making sure that they understand what this issue is and how to contain it from spreading, and trying to figure out what it is. At the same time, it's around communication out to the public, or up to leaders at the top to start to make decisions. If there's an insurance company involved, and engaging with them to figure out how to best triage. So I think some of these things are happening at the same time, and trying to make sure that I think a key piece there is the coordination and communication. And when you're having a bunch of folks that are trying to understand what the issue is, contain it, and communicate at the same time, that can be a challenge. So I think that's where we see some of the initial start of the issue, and trying to contain it is a very difficult time.
I certainly in the part of the system that I live in, the communication stuff is critical. Both some of that is the preconditioning of the environment, so that if there is some news about a cyber incident, folk don't panic. They know that what process is going to be followed. So again, back to the tabletopping, that's about making sure that folk don't try and reinvent the wheel when something real happens, that they know there's a process and they go with it. What we certainly see in any kind of bureaucracy is that folk further up the chain do want to know rapidly what's happening, and managing their expectations when information may not be particularly clear about the scale or the consequences, or indeed what the recovery time is going to be, can be challenging. But again, if those expectations have been set in advance, you're not trying to deal with people weighing in on a process during the heat of response. So trying to create the space for the technical folk to actually get to the bottom of those questions about what's going on, who's doing it, what's the damage, how do we recover. Sounds straightforward, like everybody would truly want your technical experts to be doing that stuff, but in real life they are all too often distracted by people wanting to know, well, what can we tell the media, what can we tell our customers, who have we notified, that sort of thing. So yeah, it's people. There's technical stuff that has to happen, but again, back to the theme of this whole session, it's those human factors that can actually make things far more complex in real life incidents than they would otherwise be. So training people is not just training them what to do; it's also training them what not to do and when to just actually wait to be told stuff and not to interfere.
I think that loops back to when you're talking about making sure expectations are realistic, is going through those tabletop exercises. If you have those high level decision makers that are part of that exercise, they're going to have a better understanding of what's involved and the timing that's required and what communications they're going to have to think about. So I think that also loops back to that training piece and the testing it. And once you're testing it over and over, you're going to be well prepared to respond.
Yep. It's always quite nice if something is actually running off the rails to be able to tell folk, well, of course, this isn't as bad a scenario as the one that we did in our drill last year. So it can actually help calm people down. So having some more extreme scenarios that you work through in the safe space of a tabletop can again just help people have a little bit more comfort if they're dealing with something more contained in the real world.
Yeah, definitely a team effort. At this point, it is now 11:05 Eastern time. We've got 2 more questions left on the line, and I see some folks dropping off. And for those who are still on the line, thanks for continuing to join us here. How do we keep our workforce current on the cyber threat landscape? This one really screams education and awareness and training and all of that we talked about. If there's anything that John and Dave, there's anything you would like to add?
Just to say, the cyber world does change very rapidly, and we do need to keep folk up to date. So the communications, the human factors. I know we've been emphasising in this chat the importance of training our end users, but keeping our own staff current with the kind of stuff that's going on. That is partly just about training. It's also just ensuring that in terms of work priorities, that there is some attention given to folk keeping abreast of developments. There's pieces like on maintaining certifications and the like for staff, but just good internal comms practices, circulating lots of the threat advisories so that people are aware of what's live, having regular internal discussions about events, debriefs, lessons learned after incidents, and just emphasising that. Of course, this is part of just keeping any workforce current in what is a rapidly changing technical environment. So it's not unique to cyber, but as leaders, ensuring that we are really serious about learning development, maintaining currency, and just maintaining that sense of excitement in our own teams to keep themselves on top of things.
Yeah, I think I would just add I see the key value that we provide is in hearing stories in the news about what's happening, what these issues are, and then us being able to make it applicable to folks inside the Ontario government and also our broader public sector to say, how does this impact me? And so that's usually a lot of the questions that I see, a lot of the headline stories about ransomware and attacks, and what does that mean to us and what does that mean to them? And we're able to distill that down and share that out with partners. So I think that's another key piece.
Exactly. I think often most of us say, well, we see a cyber incident, it can't possibly be me, right? But why me? So it's really just connecting all that, just to kind of echo your point there, Dave. But final question for today's session is, what is top of mind for cybersecurity in Ontario this year? I've got some thoughts on this in terms of last year of just one of our key initiatives in the education team is the creation of the Cybersecurity Conference, bringing together parts in the broader public across the province and across Canada, actually, of working remote and work secure. I think for our second year here, more details to come without revealing too much, but definitely looking at strengthening our cyber resilience, which is kind of top of mind in terms of the education front. But it'll open up to John and Dave for your thoughts.
Two things from me that actually are both in this sort of people space. There's all sorts of technical procurements and things going on. But to connect it to the topic today, two things. Firstly, continued outreach and engagement with the broader public sector, and really maturing out how do we support all of those entities, working with our minister's expert panel. But that stuff is so much about relationships, it's about communications, it's about understanding the people and getting them to buy into the sense of a shared interest in cybersecurity. So that continued outreach is I think a journey that is very much midstream and continues to be front and center. Internally, I think it's about really heightening our engagement and messaging to business executives, working on how do we tell this story about cyber risk to in a government context, to the deputy ministers, to the ministers, to folk who are making design and policy decisions in very tangible, real, actionable ways. And I think that's probably the piece where we can build on the really firm processes that we have with our IT colleagues, the great outreach and education campaigns that, yes, continue to be important and never rest on our laurels there. I think the piece that's really going to be seeing a big step change in this year, and a lot of my attention is the way we engage and report and connect into business executives around their sense of their risk profile, their sense of business strategy, digital transformation choices and the like. So creating the cyber dimension of that conversation for them.
And since you're my boss, John, I agree with you. But I will add that I think my focus was on your first one, which is around all the work we're doing as a team in the public sector, and even interfacing with the federal government, with other provinces, and especially focused on the public sector in Ontario. And I think that's what our kind of priority is around, seeing how we can help to lift cyber maturity in the public sector overall, and doing that as a team. So that's touching on your first one, John.
The one thing I'd say is I've probably been led to those in part by the course of the conversation over the last hour, that if this had been framed around a discussion about cloud, for example, I could well have ended up with other priorities, because there's so much to do of different sorts in this space. But let's not neglect the people dimensions.
That's right. Well, I think we are now at the end of our session. A special thank you to our guests today, John Roberts and David Langille, as well to you who've watched and participated. And we hope that you're able to gain some greater insight into why cybersecurity is more important than ever. And looking forward to seeing you again at the next Let's Talk Cyber session next month. All right. Bye, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks, Julia. Thanks, everyone.